Hello, my name is Joshua Bright. This is called Genetic Mutation, and the class is Concepts of Biology, and this is from Chapter 10, Genetics. So to start off real quick, today scientists now take up the term genetic variation because not all genetic variations are harmful. Sometimes it's just having two different colored eyes or something. So it's the more accepted term at this point. And we start off with the introduction to mutation. These are accidental changes in genes. I put accidental in parentheses because it's more like DNA copying mistakes that are made during cell division. And I say mistakes because it's just something that the body just kind of does because of it's caused by ionizing radiation exposure to chemicals called mutagens or infectious viruses. They're rare and they usually result in recessive alleles. So that means something like having two different colored eyes, but it can also cause harmful effects in the way of genetic disorders. And mutations can be linked to specific sexes, or they can be autosomal, meaning that the sex doesn't matter. It's between men and women, female, male. They can be passed down by parents, which are germline mutations, or they can be non-hereditary, which means that they're somatic mutations because they only affect somatic cells. And also, doctors can use pedigrees to map a family's exposure to mutations, so to see whether they're sex-linked or autosomal, or how it happened from smoking cigarettes or drinking or whatever. Now, the relevance of mutation. So many common genetic disorders are caused by mutations, and that's what I'm going to focus on here is the more harmful genetic mutations. And I'm using mutations right now, knowing that variation is the correct term, but just for sake of what we learned in our classes. And all of these numbers are rough estimates in the U.S. population based on the ratio of how many people are affected. That we found out in class. So there's hemophilia, which is your blood doesn't clot, so you have thinner blood, makes it easier to bleed out and whatnot. And based on those numbers, there's affects about 1 in 10,000 white males, which is, according to our population, about 11,825 people. And there's cystic fibrosis, and that causes mucus to clog the lungs. So it makes it hard to breathe, and that affects 1 in 2,500 Caucasians, white people. And then there's sickle cell disease, and that's irregularly shaped red blood cells that kind of clot together and form a sickle shaped blood cell, and that makes it easier for blood to clot, and it'll clog blood flow, and that affects 1 in 625 African Americans. And there's hypercholesterolemia, which is the presence of high cholesterol levels in the bloodstream, and that affects 1 in 500 people just in general. And then, of course, cancer, which cancer is directly caused by mutated cells that are growing at an extreme rate and out of control, and they cause tumors and a lot of complications. And SEER.cancer.gov said that in 2018 they claimed there were about 16 million Americans living with cancer. So if you add all of these up, just these 5, if you add them all up, that's 17 million people affected. And there's a lot of other genetic disorders, and that's about 5% of the U.S. population, which makes it pretty relevant. And what can be done? So usually they affect every cell in the body, and thus multiple body functions. So many of them are uncurable because it's very hard to target the whole body in a lot of these genetic therapies and different cures like surgery and whatnot. And some can be treated with dietary restrictions, such as hypercholesterolemia. If you restrict your diet in certain ways, then you can minimize or completely negate effects of that. Some can be cured with surgery and transplants, such as some of the red blood cell type genetic disorders. If you have a bone marrow transplant, that could potentially fix that. They're not always successful. And then in terms of something like cancer, chemotherapy is something that can treat that. But for chemotherapy, it's very difficult to target only the mutated cells. You have to target kind of the entire area of the body, if not the entire body. And so that's not the best way to do it, but that is one of the only ways that you can help to treat cancer and not necessarily cure it. So many of these are uncurable. However, in conclusion, researchers are still hopeful, but mutation is incorrectly coded genes. Essentially, it causes numerous genetic disorders. Many are uncurable, and like I said, people are still trying. My dad actually has his PhD in immunology, and he's been studying or researching for a cure for prostate cancer for the past almost 30 years at Texas Tech University. So, I mean, he's one of many that are still trying to help to fix these genetic disorders. Here are my citations. Thank you for listening.